The fire is crackling softly tonight, and I can feel that familiar warmth settling around us. Welcome to Fireplace Conversations, where we gather like our ancestors did around the evening fire to share stories that matter, wisdom that heals, and conversations that transform. I'm your host, Dr. Ikechukwu Okoh. Tonight's conversation is one I've been meaning to have for a long time. It's about something I see far too often in my work with founders and entrepreneurs across the African diaspora. It's about the exhaustion that comes not from hard work, but from working in ways that drain our very essence. It's about the loneliness that can eat at your soul, even when you're surrounded by team members, investors, and customers. And it's about the myths we've been sold about what it means to build something meaningful in this world. I've sat across from brilliant founders who built million-dollar companies but lost their marriages in the process. I've counseled entrepreneurs who achieved every metric of success they'd set for themselves, only to find themselves asking, is this it? Is this what I sacrificed everything for? I've worked with startup leaders who were so burned out they couldn't remember why they started their companies in the first place. But I've also witnessed the transformation that happens when founders discover there's another way, when they learn that success doesn't require sacrificing their humanity, when they understand that sustainable entrepreneurship isn't about working less, it's about working in harmony with who they are and what they value most. Tonight, we're talking about founder fatigue. We're talking about burnout, loneliness, and the myth of hustle. And most importantly, we're talking about a different way forward, a way that honors both your ambition and your humanity, a way that builds businesses that last because they're built by people who last. You know, in traditional African societies, our ancestors understood something profound about work and rest, about community and individual achievement. They understood that sustainability wasn't just about the environment, it was about the human spirit. Tonight, we're going to rediscover that wisdom and apply it to the modern entrepreneurial journey. Before we dive in, let me share something personal with you. As someone who works in emergency medicine and also in entrepreneurship and life design, I learned a critical concept that changed how I think about work entirely. In the ER, we have this phrase, compensating well. It refers to how the human body can mask serious underlying problems by working harder to maintain normal function. Your heart rate might stay normal, your blood pressure might look fine, but underneath, critical systems are failing. And then suddenly the compensation fails. The patient crashes. What looked stable becomes critical in moments. This is exactly what happens with founder fatigue. We compensate well until we don't. We push harder, sleep less, sacrifice more, and for a while it seems to work. Our businesses grow, our metrics improve, our investors are happy. But underneath, something essential is breaking down. We're going to take a short break here. Stay close to the fire. We'll be right back with part 1 of our conversation on sustainable entrepreneurship.
What if the most powerful boardroom in the world was a fireside? Every week, Fireplace Conversations brings you raw wisdom on leadership, entrepreneurship, and healing, drawn from hospital corridors, African villages, and global stages. Hosted by Dr. Ikechukwu Okoh, physician, coach, and strategist. Whether you're a founder, a policymaker, or simply hungry for Africa's real stories, the fire is lit. Search Fireplace Conversations on Spotify, Apple, and wherever you listen to your podcasts.
Welcome back to Fireplace Conversations. The fire is still crackling, and I can feel your presence here with me. I hope you took a moment during our break to take a deep breath, maybe stretch a little. That's the kind of self-care we're going to be talking about throughout tonight's conversation. Let's start with part 1, the myth of hustle. Listen, I need you to understand something right from the beginning. Hustle culture isn't just ineffective, it's a lie. It's a lie wrapped in Instagram quotes and sold to us by people who have forgotten what it means to be fully human. The hustle myth tells us that if we're not exhausted, we're not working hard enough. It tells us that sleep is for the weak, that rest is a luxury we can't afford, that taking time for relationships and personal well-being is a distraction from our real work. But here's what hustle culture doesn't tell you: it's designed to break you. Think about the language we use in entrepreneurship. We crush our goals. We kill it in meetings. We destroy the competition. We grind all day. This is the language of violence, of destruction. But building something meaningful, whether it's a business, a relationship, or a life, requires creation, not destruction. It requires nurturing, not crushing. I remember working with a founder, let's call him David, who came to me completely burned out. He'd built a successful tech company, raised millions in funding, employed dozens of people. By every external measure, he was winning, but he hadn't taken a real vacation in 3 years. He was having panic attacks. His marriage was falling apart. He told me, "I feel like I'm succeeding my way into a breakdown." David's story isn't unique. According to research from the National Institute of Mental Health, entrepreneurs are 50% more likely to report having a mental health condition than their counterparts in traditional employment. They're 2 times as likely to suffer from depression, 6 times more likely to suffer from ADHD, 3 times more likely to suffer from addiction, and 10 times more likely to suffer from bipolar disorder. These aren't moral failings or character weaknesses. These are the predictable outcomes of a system that tells us our worth is measured by our output, our value is determined by our exhaustion, and our success is validated by our sacrifice. David had internalized what I call the martyr entrepreneur mindset, the belief that if building something meaningful isn't destroying him, he must not be doing it right. He wore his sleepless nights like badges of honor. He boasted about eating lunch at his desk for 6 months straight. He turned his passion into a prison. David had fallen for the first trap of hustle culture, the belief that more hours equal more results. But research consistently shows that productivity actually decreases after about 50 hours per week. Beyond that point, you're not getting more done. You're just spending more time doing less quality work. The Harvard Business Review published a study showing that managers couldn't tell the difference between employees who worked 80 hours a week and those who pretended to work 80 hours a week. Think about that for a moment. The second trap is what I call busy badge syndrome. This is when we wear our exhaustion like a medal of honor. We compete over who got less sleep, who worked later, who sacrificed more. But being busy isn't the same as being productive. Being tired isn't the same as being successful. And being stressed isn't the same as being important. In my African heritage, there's a proverb: the tree that would grow high must sink its roots deep. Hustle culture teaches us to grow fast and tall, but it doesn't teach us to develop roots. It doesn't teach us sustainability. It doesn't teach us resilience. And eventually the first strong wind, a market downturn, a personal crisis, a global pandemic, knocks us over because we have no foundation. Let's pause for a moment here. I want you to really let that sink in. The idea that hustle culture teaches us to grow fast and tall, but not to develop roots. We'll be right back with more on how this plays out in the loneliness epidemic among founders.
What if the most powerful boardroom in the world was a fireside? Every week, Fireplace Conversations brings you raw wisdom on leadership, entrepreneurship, and healing, drawn from hospital corridors, African villages, and global stages. Hosted by Dr. Ikechukwu Okoh, physician, coach, and strategist. Whether you're a founder, a policymaker, or simply hungry for Africa's real stories, the fire is lit. Search Fireplace Conversations on Spotify, Apple, and wherever you listen to your podcasts.
Welcome back around the fire. I hope that moment of reflection served you well. Now let's dive into perhaps the most dangerous trap of all in hustle culture, one that sets us up for profound isolation. The third trap is the myth of the lone wolf entrepreneur. Hustle culture tells us that asking for help is weakness, that needing support means we're not cut out for this, that real entrepreneurs do it all themselves. This is perhaps the most dangerous lie of all because it sets us up for the loneliness that's eating away at founders around the world. Before we continue, I want to take a moment to catch our breath. We'll be right back with part 2, where we dive deep into the loneliness that's becoming an epidemic among founders and why it's not a personal failing but a systemic issue that we can address together.
What if the most powerful boardroom in the world was a fireside? Every week, Fireplace Conversations brings you raw wisdom on leadership, entrepreneurship, and healing, drawn from hospital corridors, African villages, and global stages. Hosted by Dr. Ikechukwu Okoh, physician, coach, and strategist. Whether you're a founder, a policymaker, or simply hungry for Africa's real stories, the fire is lit. Search Fireplace Conversations on Spotify, Apple, and wherever you listen to your podcasts.
Welcome back to the fire. I hope you took a moment to stretch, maybe step outside and breathe deeply. That's not procrastination. That's caring for the most important asset in your business, you. Now let's talk about part 2, the loneliness behind the logo. This is perhaps the most underestimated challenge in entrepreneurship. We talk about market fit, we talk about funding, we talk about scaling, but we rarely talk about the profound isolation that can come with being a founder. The Harvard Business Review published research showing that 50% of CEOs report experiencing loneliness and 61% believe it hinders their performance. But I think these numbers are actually low because admitting loneliness still carries stigma in business culture. We're supposed to be strong, confident, always in control. Loneliness doesn't fit that image. But here's what I've learned from working with hundreds of founders. Loneliness isn't a personal weakness. It's a structural reality of the entrepreneurial journey, and it follows predictable patterns that we can understand and address. The first pattern is elevation isolation. As your business grows, you get promoted out of community. You're no longer just part of the team, you're the leader. Your employees can't really be your friends in the same way. Your old peer group might not understand your new challenges. Your family loves you but can't relate to the pressures you're facing. You're surrounded by people but fundamentally alone with your decisions. This isolation is often compounded by what psychologists call imposter syndrome at scale. As your company grows, the stakes get higher, the decisions get more complex, and the consequences of failure affect more people. You start to feel like you're acting the part of a CEO rather than actually being one. You worry that people will discover you don't have all the answers, that you're making it up as you go along. The irony is that every successful founder I know has felt this way. Steve Jobs famously said he felt like a fraud well into Apple's success. Sarah Blakely, founder of Spanx, has spoken openly about feeling like she was winging it even after becoming a billionaire. But we suffer in silence because we think we're the only ones struggling. This elevation isolation creates a vicious cycle. The more isolated you feel, the more you rely on work as your primary source of validation and connection. But work relationships, especially when you're the boss, have inherent limitations. Your employees need you to be strong and decisive. Your investors need you to be confident and visionary. Your customers need you to be reliable and trustworthy. Everyone needs something from you, but few people are positioned to give you the authentic connection you need. I worked with a founder named Sarah who described this perfectly. She said, "I have a team of 30 people and I've never felt more alone. They look to me for answers, for confidence, for direction. But who do I look to? Who can I tell that I'm scared we're going to run out of money? Who can I share my doubts with without undermining their faith in the company?" The second pattern is performance pressure isolation. As a founder, you're always on. You're the face of the company, the spokesperson, the ultimate cheerleader. You learn to manage your emotions, to project confidence even when you feel uncertainty. But this emotional labor is exhausting, and it creates distance between your authentic self and your public self. The third pattern is what I call sacrifice, justification, isolation. This happens when you've given up so much for your business, time with family, hobbies, friendships, health, that admitting you're struggling feels like admitting those sacrifices were for nothing, so you double down. You isolate further. You convince yourself that this loneliness is temporary, that success will somehow retroactively justify everything you've lost. But here's what our ancestors knew that we've forgotten. No one builds anything meaningful alone. In traditional African communities, the concept of Ubuntu, I am because we are, wasn't just philosophy. It was practical wisdom. It recognized that individual success is impossible without community support, and community thriving is impossible without individual contribution. Let me share with you how this played out in traditional Ika society, where my family originates. When someone wanted to start a new venture, whether it was farming a new plot of land, learning a new trade, or building a new home, they didn't do it alone. The entire extended family, the village, would contribute. But this wasn't charity or pity, it was investment in collective prosperity. Everyone understood that if you succeeded, the whole community benefited. If you failed, the whole community suffered. So they made sure you had the resources, knowledge, and emotional support to succeed. But they also held you accountable. Success wasn't just about individual achievement, it was about contributing back to the collective good. Compare this to modern entrepreneurship, where we're expected to compete against our peers, to guard our trade secrets, to view other founders as threats rather than allies. We've created a system where collaboration is seen as weakness and vulnerability is seen as liability. But what if we applied Ubuntu principles to modern entrepreneurship? What if we created founder communities where success was measured not just by individual metrics, but by how well we lifted each other up? What if we understood that when one founder in our community thrives sustainably, it creates a model and motivation for all of us to thrive? This isn't just feel-good philosophy. Research from Harvard Business School shows that entrepreneurs with strong peer support networks are 25% more likely to succeed, report 30% higher life satisfaction, and experience significantly lower rates of anxiety and depression. I want to pause here because this concept of Ubuntu, I am because we are, what is so central to everything we're discussing tonight. It challenges everything we've been taught about individual success and competition. We'll continue exploring how this ancient wisdom can transform modern entrepreneurship right this break.
What if the most powerful boardroom in the world was a fireside? Every week, Fireplace Conversations brings you raw wisdom on leadership, entrepreneurship, and healing, drawn from hospital corridors, African villages, and global stages. Hosted by Dr. Ikechukwu Okoh, physician, coach, and strategist. Whether you're a founder, a policymaker, or simply hungry for Africa's real stories, the fire is lit. Search Fireplace Conversations on Spotify, Apple, and wherever you listen to your podcasts.
And we're back. The warmth of this conversation, the connection we're building here tonight, this is a small example of what Ubuntu looks like in practice. Even though we may be separated by distance, we're connected by shared experiences and common humanity. Modern entrepreneurship has forgotten Ubuntu. We've been sold the myth that asking for help is weakness, that vulnerability is unprofessional, that true leaders carry their burdens alone. But research shows that founders who have strong peer support networks are more likely to succeed, more resilient in facing challenges, and report higher life satisfaction throughout their entrepreneurial journey. The loneliness epidemic among founders isn't just affecting individual well-being, it's affecting business outcomes. Lonely leaders make more impulsive decisions. They're less innovative, because they don't have diverse perspectives to challenge their thinking. They're more likely to experience burnout and make critical errors in judgment. So what's the antidote? First, we need to normalize the conversation about founder loneliness. It's not a personal failing. it's an occupational hazard. Second, we need to intentionally build what I call founder families. Small groups of entrepreneurs who can support each other with complete honesty and without judgment. Third, we need to remember that vulnerability isn't the opposite of strength. It's the birthplace of courage, innovation, and authentic connection. We're going to take another short break, and when we return, I'll share the 5 shifts that can transform not just how you work, but how you live. These aren't just business strategies, they're life design principles that honor both your ambition and your humanity.
What if the most powerful boardroom in the world was a fireside? Every week, Fireplace Conversations brings you raw wisdom on leadership, entrepreneurship, and healing, drawn from hospital corridors, African villages, and global stages. Hosted by Dr. Ikechukwu Okoh, physician, coach, and strategist. Whether you're a founder, a policymaker, or simply hungry for Africa's real stories, the fire is lit. Search Fireplace Conversations on Spotify, Apple, and wherever you listen to your podcasts.
Before we move forward, I want to pause and acknowledge something. If you're listening to this conversation and recognizing yourself in these descriptions of burnout and loneliness, I want you to know that it's not your fault. You didn't choose to feel this way. You've been operating within systems and cultures that were designed to extract value from you without regard for your well-being. The hustle culture that promises you freedom through overwork is actually a form of modern colonialism. It extracts your labor, your creativity, your life force, and gives you just enough validation to keep you going, but never enough fulfillment to let you rest. I learned this lesson painfully in my own journey. When I work in entrepreneurship away from medicine, I thought I will be escaping the burnout culture of hospital work. Instead, I find myself sometimes working longer hours, sleeping less, and feeling more isolated than I ever had as a physician working shifts. The difference is that as a doctor, the system is externally imposed. I know the medicine was designed to push me to my limits, but as an entrepreneur, I am doing it to myself. I am my own taskmaster, my own prison guard, and somehow that makes it worse. It took me years to realize that I hadn't escaped the system. I had internalized it. I had become the agent of my own exploitation, and until I understood this, I couldn't begin to design something different. This feels like the perfect moment for us to take one more pause together. We've talked about the myths that are breaking us down. We've explored the loneliness that's eating away at our souls. When we return, we're going to turn toward hope and solutions. We're going to talk about what sustainable entrepreneurship actually looks like in practice. Stay with me. We'll be right back.
What if the most powerful boardroom in the world was a fireside? Every week, Fireplace Conversations brings you raw wisdom on leadership, entrepreneurship, and healing, drawn from hospital corridors, African villages, and global stages. Hosted by Dr. Ikechukwu Okoh, physician, coach, and strategist. Whether you're a founder, a policymaker, or simply hungry for Africa's real stories, the fire is lit. Search Fireplace Conversations on Spotify, Apple, and wherever you listen to your podcasts.
Welcome back to Fireplace Conversations. The fire is still warm, and so is our conversation. I hope you use that break to reflect on what we've been discussing, the myths that are breaking us down, and the loneliness that's eating away at our souls. Now it's time for part 3, Sustainable Entrepreneurship. This is where we turn from diagnosis to cure, from problem to solution. Sustainable entrepreneurship isn't about working less. It's about working in harmony with your values, your relationships, and your long-term vision for your life. It's about building businesses that enhance your humanity instead of depleting it, and it requires 5 fundamental shifts in how we think about work and success. The first shift is from optimization to regeneration. Hustle culture is obsessed with optimization, doing more, faster, better, cheaper, but optimization assumes that you're a machine that just needs better programming. Regeneration recognizes that you're a living system that needs cycles of growth and rest, challenge and recovery, expansion and integration. Let me give you a concrete example of what this looks like. Instead of trying to maximize every hour of your workday, regenerative entrepreneurship asks, what does your natural energy cycle look like? When are you most creative? When do you need to process and reflect? When do you need to recharge? I worked with a founder named Maria who was struggling with this. She was trying to force herself into a 6 a.m. to 10 p.m. work schedule because that's what she thought serious entrepreneurs did. But Maria was naturally a night person. Her most creative hours were between 10 p.m. and 2 a.m. By forcing herself into a traditional schedule, she was working against her biology and getting mediocre results with maximum effort. When we redesigned her schedule to honor her natural rhythms, starting work at 10 a.m., taking a long break in the afternoon for exercise and family time, then doing her most important creative work in the evening, her productivity tripled and her stress levels plummeted. She wasn't working more hours. She was working with her body instead of against it. Regeneration also means understanding that rest isn't the absence of productivity. It's a different kind of productivity. When you're sleeping, your brain is consolidating memories and solving problems. When you're walking in nature, you're activating the default mode network that's crucial for innovation. When you're spending unstructured time with people you love, you're filling emotional reserves that will sustain you through challenges. Think about how a farmer works. They don't try to grow crops year-round on the same soil. They understand the importance of seasons, of letting fields rest, of crop rotation. They work hard during planting and harvest seasons, but they also honor the winter months when the soil regenerates. Your entrepreneurial journey needs the same rhythm. The second shift is from individual achievement to collaborative success. This doesn't mean you give up your vision or leadership. It means you recognize that the strongest leaders are those who can build strong teams, who can delegate effectively, who can create systems that don't depend entirely on their constant input. But here's where most founders get stuck. They confuse delegation with abdication, and they confuse control with leadership. True collaborative success requires what I call conscious interdependence. The ability to be simultaneously strong and vulnerable, decisive and open to input, accountable and willing to share credit. Let me tell you about Marcus, a founder who built a marketing agency that grew from just him to 50 employees in 3 years. But Marcus was miserable. He was working 70-hour weeks because he felt like he had to review and approve every piece of work that went out the door. He trusted his team to do their jobs, but he didn't trust them to maintain his standards. The breakthrough came when Marcus realized that his need to control everything wasn't protecting quality. It was limiting it. His team members were capable of great work, but they were delivering Marcus-level work because they knew anything beyond that would be changed anyway. They stopped pushing their creative boundaries because they learned their job was to anticipate what Marcus wanted, not to bring their own brilliance to the table. When Marcus shifted from being a quality gatekeeper to being a quality catalyst, when he started asking, how can I help you do your best work, instead of, how can I make sure you don't mess up, everything changed. His team started producing work that exceeded his own capabilities. Projects got finished faster with better results. And Marcus finally had time to focus on the strategic vision that only he could provide. This is what Ubuntu looks like in modern business. Understanding that your role as a leader isn't to be the smartest person in the room, but to create conditions where everyone in the room can be their smartest selves. I learned this lesson the hard way in my own entrepreneurial journey. I thought delegation was a sign that I wasn't committed enough, wasn't working hard enough. But what I discovered is that the best leaders are multipliers. They make everyone around them better. They create value not just through their own efforts, but by unleashing the potential in others. The third shift is from scarcity to abundance thinking. Hustle culture is built on scarcity, the fear that there's not enough time, not enough opportunities, not enough success to go around. Abundance thinking recognizes that creativity, innovation, and value creation are unlimited resources. When you're not operating from fear, you make better decisions. When you're not hoarding opportunities, you build better relationships. The fourth shift is from external validation to internal alignment. So much of entrepreneurial stress comes from trying to meet other people's expectations, investors, customers, competitors, society. But sustainable entrepreneurship requires that you get clear on your own values, your own definition of success, your own vision for the life you want to build. This doesn't mean you ignore market feedback or customer needs. It means you filter every decision through your core values. It means you build a business that reflects who you are, not who you think you should be. When there's alignment between your values and your work, you have access to sustainable energy. When there's misalignment, you're constantly fighting against yourself. The fifth shift is from destination to journey orientation. Hustle culture tells us that happiness, fulfillment, and rest are rewards we earn after we've made it. But made it to where? When is enough? Enough. Journey orientation recognizes that life is happening right now, not in some future version of success. This shift asks you to design your daily life, your weekly rhythms, your monthly cycles in ways that honor what matters most to you right now. It asks you to find meaning and satisfaction in the process of building, not just in the outcomes you achieve. Now, these shifts might sound philosophical, but they have very practical implications. Let me share 3 questions that can help you start implementing them immediately. These are the questions I ask every founder I work with, and they're the questions I continue to ask myself. Question 1. What would change if you treated yourself like your most valuable employee? Think about it. You probably wouldn't expect your best employee to work 7 days a week without breaks. You wouldn't expect them to skip meals or ignore their family obligations. You'd want them to take vacations, to pursue professional development, to maintain their health and relationships. Why don't you extend the same care to yourself? Question 2. If you could only work 4 hours a day, what would you focus on? This question forces you to identify what actually moves the needle in your business versus what just makes you feel busy. It reveals the difference between high-impact activities and busy work. Most founders are shocked to realize how much of their time is spent on activities that don't actually drive results. Question 3. What would you need to believe about yourself and your worth to build a business that enhances rather than depletes your life? This gets to the heart of the identity work that sustainable entrepreneurship requires. Often, our relationship with work is really a reflection of our relationship with ourselves. Now let me share 3 practical tools that can help you implement these shifts immediately. These aren't abstract concepts, they're concrete practices that you can start using this week to move toward more sustainable entrepreneurship. The first tool is what I call the energy audit. For 1 week, I want you to track not just what you're doing, but how you feel while you're doing it. Every hour, rate your energy level on a scale of 1 to 10 and note what activity you were engaged in. Don't try to change anything yet, just observe. At the end of the week, you'll have data about what gives you energy and what drains it. You might discover that certain types of meetings energize you while others leave you depleted. You might realize that you're most creative in the morning but most analytical in the afternoon. You might find that certain environments, certain people, certain types of work align with your natural rhythms, while others work against them. This isn't about avoiding all energy-draining activities. That's impossible in business, but it's about being intentional. If you know that client calls drain you, can you batch them all on one day and protect your creative time on other days? If you know that financial analysis requires your peak mental energy, can you schedule it during your strongest hours instead of trying to do it at the end of a long day? The second tool is the collaboration map. Draw a circle and put yourself in the center. Now draw circles around you representing all the key relationships in your business life: co-founders, employees, advisors, mentors, investors, customers, suppliers, even competitors. For each relationship, ask yourself, is this relationship primarily extractive, neutral, or generative? Extractive relationships are those where one party consistently takes more than they give. Neutral relationships are transactional, fair exchanges but not particularly energizing or growth promoting. Generative relationships are those where both parties are better because of the connection, where the sum is greater than the parts. Your goal isn't to eliminate all extractive relationships. Some are necessary, but you want to minimize them and maximize generative ones. This might mean having difficult conversations about expectations, setting better boundaries, or actively cultivating relationships with people who share your values around sustainable success. The third tool is what I call the values filter. Most entrepreneurs make decisions based on external metrics: revenue, growth, market share, investor approval. But sustainable entrepreneurs also filter decisions through their core values. Write down your top 5 values, not what you think you should value, but what you actually value when you're at your best. Maybe it's creativity, family time, intellectual challenge, social impact, financial security. Now, for every major decision in your business, ask, does this align with my values or conflict with them? This doesn't mean you only do things that perfectly align with all your values. That's not realistic. But it means you're conscious of the trade-offs. If you're taking on a project that pays well but conflicts with your value of creativity, you acknowledge that trade-off and maybe balance it with a creative side project. If you're working with a client who doesn't share your values, you set clear boundaries and time limits. The values filter helps you make decisions from the inside out instead of the outside in. And when your business aligns with your values, you have access to sustainable energy that doesn't require external motivation or validation. Let me take a short break before we close tonight's conversation.
What if the most powerful boardroom in the world was a fireside? Every week, Fireplace Conversations brings you raw wisdom on leadership, entrepreneurship, and healing, drawn from hospital corridors, African villages, and global stages. Hosted by Dr. Ikechukwu Okoh, physician, coach, and strategist. Whether you're a founder, a policymaker, or simply hungry for Africa's real stories, the fire is lit. Search Fireplace Conversations on Spotify, Apple, and wherever you listen to your podcasts.
As our conversation draws to a close tonight, I want to leave you with this. The entrepreneurial journey doesn't have to break you to make you. Success doesn't require sacrificing your humanity. Building something meaningful doesn't mean destroying everything else that matters. But I also want to be honest with you. Changing how you approach entrepreneurship isn't just about learning new techniques or implementing new systems. It's about identity work. It's about questioning beliefs you may have held for years about what makes you worthy, what makes you valuable, what makes you successful. For many of us, our relationship with work is really a reflection of our relationship with ourselves. If you believe deep down that you're only valuable when you're producing, then rest will feel like laziness. If you believe that asking for help is weakness, then building collaborative relationships will feel threatening. If you believe that your worth is determined by external validation, then internal alignment will feel risky. This identity work is some of the hardest work you'll ever do as an entrepreneur. It requires you to examine not just what you're building, but why you're building it and at what cost. It requires you to be honest about what you're afraid of losing if you stop grinding so hard. It requires you to imagine who you might become if you built your business from a place of abundance rather than scarcity, from integration rather than fragmentation, from love rather than fear. Our ancestors built civilizations that lasted thousands of years. They didn't do it by grinding themselves into dust. They did it by understanding the rhythm of work and rest, by honoring both individual vision and community wisdom, by building systems that could sustain and regenerate over generations. You have that same wisdom in your DNA. You have the capacity to build businesses that create value without consuming your soul. You have the ability to lead with strength and vulnerability, to achieve with sustainability, to succeed without sacrifice. But it requires a different way of thinking about entrepreneurship. It requires that you reject the myths that say your worth is measured by your exhaustion. It requires that you build communities that can hold you when the weight of leadership feels too heavy. It requires that you design your work and your life as integrated systems that support and enhance each other. This is life design at its most fundamental level. It's the recognition that you are not just building a business, you are designing a life, and that life should be one that honors your values, nurtures your relationships, and allows you to contribute your unique gifts to the world in ways that are sustainable over the long term. If tonight's conversation has resonated with you, I invite you to take one small action this week. Maybe it's scheduling a real break, not checking email while eating lunch, but actually stepping away. Maybe it's reaching out to another founder who might be struggling with loneliness. Maybe it's asking yourself those 3 questions I shared and really sitting with the answers. But here's what I really want you to understand. This isn't just about you. When you choose sustainable entrepreneurship, when you reject the myths that say your worth is measured by your exhaustion, when you build businesses that enhance rather than deplete your humanity, you're not just changing your own life. You're modeling a different way of being for everyone who watches your journey. Your employees see that it's possible to be successful without sacrificing their families. Your children see that work can be meaningful without being destructive. Your peers see that there's an alternative to the hustle culture that's burning so many of us out. You become living proof that another way is possible. I think about the entrepreneurs I work with who have made this shift, and I see the ripple effects. Maria, who redesigned her schedule around her natural rhythms, now has team members who feel permission to work in ways that honor their own energy cycles. Marcus, who shifted from control to collaboration, has created a company culture where people feel safe to bring their full creativity to work. David, who was succeeding his way into a breakdown, now runs a company that actively supports employee mental health and work-life integration. These aren't just individual transformations, they're cultural ones. Each founder who chooses sustainability over burnout, each entrepreneur who values their humanity alongside their ambition, each leader who builds generative rather than extractive relationships is contributing to a larger shift in how we think about work, success, and what it means to build something meaningful. And this matters more now than ever. We're facing challenges as a species that require sustainable solutions. Climate change, inequality, mental health crises, social fragmentation. We can't solve these problems with the same mindset that created them. We can't heal a broken world with broken people leading broken organizations. We need entrepreneurs who are whole, who are connected to their values and their communities, who understand that true wealth includes not just financial capital but social capital, intellectual capital, spiritual capital, and emotional capital. We need leaders who can think beyond the next quarter, the next funding round, the next exit, to consider the kind of world we're building for our children and their children. This is why sustainable entrepreneurship isn't a luxury or a nice to have. It's a necessity. It's how we build businesses that can address our deepest challenges while honoring our deepest humanity. Remember, you don't have to have all the answers right now. You don't have to transform your entire approach to work overnight, but you can start. You can take one step toward a more sustainable way of building the things that matter to you. Thank you for joining me around the fire tonight. Thank you for being part of this community of founders, creators, and life designers who believe that we can build businesses and lives that honor both our ambitions and our humanity. Until next time, remember, you are not just building a company, you are designing a life. Make it one worth living. This has been Fireplace Conversations. I'm Dr. Ikechukwu Okoh. Keep the fire burning, keep the conversations going, and keep designing the life you truly want to live. As you step away from this conversation tonight, I want you to carry with you this simple truth. Your entrepreneurial journey is not separate from your human journey. They are one and the same. Every decision you make in business is also a decision about the kind of life you want to live, the kind of person you want to become, and the kind of world you want to help create. Good night.